So this is my dissertation, Rethinking Socioeconomics Through Higher Education, a National Study on Race, College Internships, Minority-Serving Institutions, and Post-College Annualized Salary Disparities. And so for those of you joining in from Sacramento, this is something that I've been conceptualizing back in 2018. So this is 5 years in the works finally coming into fruition through my dissertation. And so you could think of this as a blueprint for my nonprofit, Higher Roots Socioeconomic Solutions. And so again, we'll be talking about that in the second part of this presentation. And so I've had the fortune of being able to think about this and refine this over the years during my doctoral program. And so I'm excited to share this with you all. And so what's going on? What am I looking at here? And so some of the background of my work. And so, you know, for most of us here, we go to higher education, we attend college to get better opportunities, right? And so our expectation is to make more money, get jobs. So essentially is the social equalizer, right? But unfortunately, that's not always the case. And these outcomes of salary, for example, can differ between racial groups, as I'll demonstrate in this next slide. And so what I want to emphasize here is that this is the racial wealth gap of college graduates. Kind of surprising, right? Given that we would expect everybody to have better outcomes when they graduate from college, which is true. So I want to first demonstrate these differences between the columns here. And so we have the median family net worth of college graduates in 2013 on this left column right here, and the middle column of non-college graduates. So immediately we observe that having a college degree is beneficial, right? But these benefits differ between racial groups. So now we want to emphasize the rows here. And so when we go to the far right column, we do see that the multiplication of these of net worth between non-college grads and four-year college graduates differ significantly depending on which racial group you're in. And so one of the emphases that I want to put forth here is that typically these differences might be accounted or assumed because different racial groups have different maybe are just less superior or not as well performing because of certain cultural differences, right? But I want to emphasize the social structures that dictate a lot of these outcomes in terms of these differences of race. So that's what I wanted to emphasize in this study. And so why is this happening? And so I integrated two theories here, social capital theory and human capital theory. So think of social capital in terms of all the things that you have something to do with your social structures, like your family and your friends, the college you attended, maybe your major, and even the internships you might have participated in that all have contributed to the resources that you're able to accumulate and have access to in terms of human capital, which is your knowledge, skills, training, and degree attainment, all geared towards helping create a better economy because you have accumulated the skills needed to be a productive member of society. And so because of that, we have resulting economic value in terms of your earnings, but what I wanted to emphasize is that there are differences in terms of the social capital that then dictates your access to these various forms of human capital, which in turn results in these racial disparities in earnings. And so another way to rearrange this is the variables that I chose for this study. So I have a total of 14 variables consisting of different student level variables, such as race, as you see here, or gender and social class. And then I also have institutional variables, such as the type of minority-serving institution you might have participated in, such as a historically black college and university, or a Hispanic-serving institution, or even a predominantly white institution, a PWI. But I also accounted for other institutional characteristics, such as whether you attended a public or private university. So not all of that is shown here, but I wanted to emphasize the three main variables of my study, which is internships, MSIs, and race. And so for many of us, we might have participated in some form of workforce training. Myself, for example, I was a McNair Scholar, so in my case, that helped me train in terms of research to become a professional researcher in the field, which also helped me gain access to this doctoral program, right? but I also wanted to emphasize minority-serving institutions because of the funding and the support structures that are in place to help support our students of color entering college. And so I wanted to emphasize all these social infrastructures that account for these differences in salary. So there's much more going on than simply students not performing as well as their other non-minority counterparts simply because of their race. There are social infrastructures that greatly impact these differences, especially over time. And so how do I go about explaining what's happening? So I use two national data sets. And so these two data sets are from the National Center of Education Statistics, known as a post-baccalaureate and beyond data set. And so these two data sets, as implied by the name, track students' outcomes over time after they graduate, including salary and their employment and the type of jobs that they get. So this was these are two appropriate data sets to look at. And so I used the 2008 and 2018 data set specifically because of its longitudinal nature. And so there's 3 data points that I'm able to look at to track salary disparities over time. And so these data points are in 2009, 2012, and 2018. And so I also looked at a more recent data set through the 2016 and 2017 data set. And so this data set actually disaggregates internship type, so differences between paid and unpaid internships, and also differentiates between the different minority-serving institutions. And so this is something that this data set covers that is not covered in the 2008 data set. So being able to combine these 2 data sets allows me to look at data not just longitudinally, but also look at data that is more recent and relevant to this current study. And so my sample consists of 4-year college graduates. There were a handful of 2-year college graduates, but I omitted them from this study simply because employers are increasingly looking for 4-year graduates with bachelor's degrees. So I wanted to make comparisons amongst those students. And also included only employed students in my regression models. So this includes both part-time and full-time students, even those who are grad students, because some grad students are also working part or full-time. So I've included all of them in this study, and so the nuances of those differences are further explained in the full dissertation, but I'll be going over the main findings in this presentation. And just a quick overview of the analyses, and so I come up with my conclusions through descriptives, logistic and multiple regression, and propensity score matching. And so we'll start with the first key findings. And so my first research question is, how does annualized salary change over time after graduation based on race? And so again, this data is from the 2008 to 2018 data set, and we see the 3 time points displayed at the bottom here. And so you see on the vertical axis, the vertical axis, increments of income by $10,000. And then I also have the income quintiles to demonstrate social mobility, to better visualize social mobility. So we see that most students start at the second income quintile. And so for the most part, students are just making a little under $30,000 right after they graduate from college. And we see some steady growth after 3 years in 2012. But I want us to focus mostly on what happens in 2018. We see that rapid growth for Asian students in particular, and also white students who both skyrocket to the 4th income quintile. So they go from the 2nd to the 4th income quintile in 2 years, while Black and Hispanic students, for instance, only make it to the middle class, to the 2nd and 3rd, or to the 3rd income quintile. And so that's something that I want to emphasize here. So again, this reinforces the fact that even though students with college graduates or students with college degrees do improve their outcomes, the rates at which these salaries increase over time differs tremendously between racial and ethnic groups. So my second research question is, what is the salary gap between predominantly white institutions and minority-serving institutions? And so we see that predominantly white institutions are outpacing HSIs and HBCUs. It doesn't look like much, but we'll see these differences differ in terms of how we cut the data. And so PWIs, for example, are making just a little under $32,000, and graduates from HSIs and HBCUs are making $27,000 and about $25,000 each. And so there's a lot more to that. So I'll explain some of these differences in the later slides, but as it stands, when you just look at averages without controlling for any other variables, PWIs or graduates from PWIs are outpacing their other HSI and HBCU counterparts. And so now we get to the multiple regression results. So my third research question, controlling for all other factors, do race and ethnicity, internships, and MSIs uniquely contribute to higher salary 1 year after earning a bachelor's degree? And so this was based on a multiple regression model of my 14 variables that I mentioned earlier. And these are the main effects. And so for those who participate in paid internships in college are predicted to make over $4,000 more than students who didn't participate in an internship at all. And then we see something opposite happen when we look at students who participate in unpaid internships. And so those who participate in unpaid internships make a predicted decrease of $2,800 compared to non-internship participants. So this demonstrates the importance of not just internships, but the fact that whether or not they're paid makes a big difference in terms of their salaries after college. So other key findings, and so initially, Black college graduates and Hispanic college graduates were initially predicted to make less than their white counterparts. So in this case, white college graduates were the reference group in the multiple regression model. But when we account for social class, there's a sign change. And so we find that Black college graduates actually are predicted to make over $1,800 more than their white counterparts, and then Hispanic college graduates are expected to make just a little over $200. So social class does matter, and so what this means that if it wasn't for social class, if it wasn't for Black and Hispanic students coming from lower social classes upon entering college, then we would see that these outcomes would change. And now we see that Black and Hispanic students are getting the most out of a college degree and making more, right? And so when we account for all of these together, and so this is data from the two-way interaction terms. So I won't get into detail about that, but these are some of the key findings here that are interesting. And so Hispanic and Black students, or Hispanic and Black college graduates benefited the most with paid internships at HSI while others didn't. And so this is important to consider here, given that sometimes there might be stigmas with MSIs, HSIs in particular, of trying to isolate certain groups and focus more on one group over the other. But that's not the case here. So as demonstrated, not only are HSIs benefiting Hispanic students, their target group of students, but also other students of color. And so we see that Black students are benefiting from participating in paid internships and have predicted higher starting salaries. And so another interesting finding is that the negative effects that we found earlier of unpaid internships were exacerbated at HSIs. And so this indicates that we need to focus a lot on funding these internship opportunities so that students can get paid while in college, but also have that experience when they prepare themselves for the workforce. And then finally, something that was not expected is unpaid internships at HBCUs had a net positive predicted salary, and that Black college graduates from HBCUs had an added benefit. So this is another thing here that I wanted to focus on, given that there is a lot of new funding and different support structures that are coming now for Black students to enter HBCUs. So this is very promising in terms of the opportunities that Black students can get at HBCUs, and also for Black and Hispanic students entering HSIs. And this is also especially important for UCLA, who is slated to become HSI eligible by 2025. So there's different directions in which we could prepare for this when the time comes for us to apply to be eligible for HSI designation here at UCLA. And so key takeaways, again, that I want to emphasize. So earlier, we found that Black and Hispanic college graduates we're predicted to make more than our white college counterparts when we account for social class. So we want to continue to push for ways to elevate the socioeconomic statuses of Black and Hispanic college graduates. So that in turn would help with the passage of generational wealth, so that when the next generation of Black and Hispanic students come into college, they would be better positioned to have better earnings when they graduate from college. And so again, increased opportunities for paid internships, especially for Black and Hispanic students at HSIs. Again, that's another important implication for HSI eligible institutions such as UCLA. And so ideally, paid internships should be part of the GE curriculum, which I'll go over, which is something that I'd like to cover through Higher Roots, my nonprofit. But essentially, this would help create more opportunities for students to get into these paid internships so that they could better position themselves socioeconomically upon degree completion. Again, find funding to ensure that unpaid internships are compensated. And so not all unpaid internships are bad. Sometimes a big emphasis of these unpaid internships are community-based, and sometimes the disciplines, the departments that provide these opportunities don't have the same funding as maybe a STEM or a business major would. And so making sure that these unpaid internships are funded so that students who are seeking to elevate their socioeconomic status after college will have the opportunity to not only provide services for the community, but also be able to benefit socioeconomically at the same time. And then, yes, increasing Black student pathways to HBCUs and HBCU internships. And so it's still unclear, given the sample size, what this can look like in terms of paid internships at HBCUs. But we did interestingly find that unpaid internships were beneficial in general, but even more so for Black students at HBCUs. So that shows great promise as we continue to gather more funding and gather more attention towards the success of Black students at our HBCUs. And so this is something different that I wanted to implement that might help position the nonprofit for grants and other partnerships with accreditation institutions, is to implement race-sensitive socioeconomic metrics for rankings, funding, and accountability. And so often, you might see like a US News, for example, their social mobility metrics are based on the proportion of students who graduate from the lower income quintiles and move up and graduate. And so mere graduation rates don't also determine salary after college. So a lot of what I want to emphasize here is that, for example, if we're going to provide rankings, for instance, I think it's important for students and their families to understand what their socioeconomic futures can look like based on their racial background. Of course, that might be highly politicized, but there are different ways to implement this, and so I have some ways of strategizing that in this next slide. So before we get to that, so what exactly is Higher Roots Socioeconomic Solutions? And so you see at the bottom here, for those of you at home, you could see it more clearly, but for those of you in person, it says Rethinking Socioeconomics Through Higher Education. Sounds familiar, right? Title of my dissertation.